Three, two, one. Well, gang, I apologize for that. We had a blackout here. The lights went out for a second. It was like fast, boom, and then went back on, and I lost Dr. Burke. But fortunately, he was courteous enough to continue to join us. I apologize, Dr. Burke, very much for that. To interrupt your train of thought, I apologize, Dr. Burks. So we were at the triangle flying over, and the triangle had it was the classic triangle with the lights in the corners, right? And the light underneath, and it even had a saucer behind it or something.
That's true. I wanted to share with you that this was a triangular-shaped object, had a light on each of the apices, and there was an amber or reddish light at the base. And the object signaled at us from each of the lights as it approached from forward lights, and as it receded towards the volcano later, it signaled at us from the rear lights as well. When it first approached us, I could see that it was enormous because it went over the ridge line where there was a small church. I may have mentioned that.
Yeah.
We were cut off, and it was at least 200 to 300 feet across. As it came towards us in a wide arc, I was exalted. I was incredibly happy because I realized we're not alone in the universe, that UFO intelligence was approachable. I had a kind of, I guess you would say, epiphany. Epiphany is the word, yes?
Yeah.
And I remembered a terrible time when I was an activist in the anti-nuclear movement, and we used to do something was called the bombing run, where physicians would describe the medical consequences of a nuclear war and what would it be like if a 1 megaton bomb was detonated over Moscow or Los Angeles or Washington, D.C. And we had information from the United Nations and other organizations that had studied the effects of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and had extrapolated it onto what a nuclear, what was then called nuclear exchange, which is a polite way of saying mass murder on a scheme that the world has never seen with hundreds of millions of dead. So we would describe what a nuclear attack would be on one city, and it was very disturbing in my life because I knew I was young, I had a young family, I was working, and I had a new career, internal medicine, and I knew there was a Soviet submarine during the Cold War, and this in the 1980s, that could fire a cruise missile and would strike Los Angeles within less than 10 minutes, and everyone that I loved dearly would die, or worse, would survive the initial blast and suffer a slow lingering death from radiation poisoning.
Wow.
So when I saw that UFO coming towards us, I felt exalted because I knew that we were not alone in the universe, that other civilizations had lived and prospered to the point where they could get out into the stars and not self-destruct, as we sometimes appear we're going to do. And I felt that even if we had destroyed ourselves, and I imagine in a kind of naive way, that somewhere out in space there would be ET children who would remember the late, great Earth.
That's such a wonderful thought. It's such a wonderful thought. And, in many ways it's escaped me because I think a lot of people might have felt like you did before that sighting, very pessimistic, that we don't stand a chance, or even people may feel this way now. And sometimes I do. Humanity stinks. We're so sociopathic. We just care about ourselves. Humanity's going to kill ourselves with these weapons one way or another. It's going to be something. We're going to destroy ourselves. We don't stand a chance. We pass homeless people on the street. We destroy our own home, our beautiful planet, let things go extinct, all that stuff. And then to realize another.
We can't destroy the planet. We can destroy our civilization.
True, of course.
I can assure that Mother Earth's capacity for regeneration is tremendous.
Certainly.
And 1,000 or 100,000 years after whatever destruction we wrought on the planet, she will bring back life and be more exuberant than ever before.
Yeah, the universe has that thing. It's built for life, But to know that another civilization passed that hurdle, past the nuclear, past all that stuff, and you made that in that moment, the fact that it made you smile and happy when you're thinking about those nuclear stuff, I was, it gives me kind of hope knowing that another civilization did it, and that is such a wonderful point. It's a wonderful point.
Well, there are many reasons for hope. And the contact network that I've been working with for these many years, we are establishing simple communication, but they're friendly, cooperative. These are staged events. They're not random. think that it could perhaps be a microcosm of what humanity's relationship is with the intelligence behind the UFO phenomena. So now we're moving into not necessarily disclosure, but confirmation. And as I like to say to my contact activist friends, fellow contact workers, I see there's two kinds of disclosure. There's one by the people, which is direct, people to people, ETs interacting with us. And then there's one by the authorities, the so-called authorities, the elites. One is the disclosure of the people. The other is disclosure of the bosses. And I'm definitely on the side of the people. Let's just say that.
Right on, right on. You have two really intense theories, and they're, I know each one is a book, basically, you know, but if, in as little, as dense as you can, could you give the audience a primer to both of those? Because I think they're really important.
I know you're referring to the virtual experience model, which is something that was showed to me by UFO intelligences. What was the second one? Because there's
it was the counterintelligence aspect.
Intelligence, counterintelligence. Yeah, these are related, you know, for sure. Basically, what I discovered was for the first week I was doing contact activities back in the fall of 1992, UFO intelligence staged a series of contact experiences in which they showed how illusion, their creation of illusion, was an important mechanism of contact. So September 1, I'm driving home from the San Fernando Medical Center where I worked in the ER, and as I'm getting on the freeway, I see something that I've never seen before. It was an impossible plane that could not fly. It was around 5 in the afternoon, and it was an old-fashioned wooden plane, looked like vintage World War I, except without a biplane. It was painted like it was designed for the circus. It was fire engine red, and it had a lightning bolt on it. The wings were incredibly short, so short that it could not possibly achieve lift. They were like 6 feet long on each side. And the thing was only moving about 45 or 50 miles an hour past me, about 100 feet above the 405 freeway in broad daylight. So from the very beginning, I was being shown things that it's not so unreasonable to say that something impossible is perhaps illusion, and that's what it was. As I continued to do the contact work, I discovered that illusion is an important mechanism because about a year later, I was working with a Russian contactee who I will call Misha. And Misha called me on the phone, and I was getting ready to go to a conference. It was a Tuesday, Easter week, 1994. And he calls me about a sighting that he had. And it was over the 101 freeway about 8 o'clock at night. And he saw a beautiful illuminated disc being chased by helicopters right over the 101 freeway in the San Fernando Valley, where 1 million people lived. And I remember saying to him, Misha, I don't think that was real flying saucer or real helicopters, because let's face it, UFOs can outfly the Top Gun F-14s of our Air Force, F-15s. So the idea of American helicopters chasing a UFO doesn't make sense. If it was back engineered or a craft that the military had seized, they would not be testing it over a place where 1 million people live, because if it got into trouble, it would land in a place where hundreds of thousands of people would know about it. So I said to him, it's probably some kind of illusion that was staged. Little did I know that UFO intelligence, according to the great late John Keel, the author who wrote amazing books about paranormal, said that UFO intelligence is what he called reflective. Not reflective in the sense of deep thought and having deep thought and reflecting on a situation, but reflective like a mirror is reflected. And so that if you have a belief, this intelligence, which is totally telepathic, will actually stage contact experiences that reinforce that existing belief. ET good, ET bad, ET telepathic. And so after I said this to him, I'm driving on the 405 freeway north, and I see 2 impossible helicopters. One was an old Sikorsky Korean War vintage, the kind that had a very big sort of nozzle front, and the pilot sat above the cabin looking down. These things had developed in World War. Well, they had developed in the Korean War. You don't really see them. They're vintage. And the paint job was totally crazy. It was painted like candy-colored green. The company was also a vintage Vietnam War style Huey helicopter. That's paint job was also completely off base and looked like something out of a circus. And they were flying back and forth over the ravine through which the 405 freeway goes in the Sepulveda Pass. And I'm thinking to myself, I talked about a visual display that was an illusion with my friend, and now they're giving me what appears very likely to be a visual display that's an illusion. And as I'm driving, of course, I am a contactee, and so I don't miss a chance to try to communicate mentally. And so in my mind, I sent out a message of welcome. One universe, one people was this slogan celebrating brotherhood and sisterhood made large. I opened up my heart chakras. Of course, I was driving 60 miles an hour on the freeway, so I was going to focus on the road as well. And I just said, welcome. And what that Huey helicopter did was it then, instead of crisscrossing the freeway, came down about 50 feet above my vehicle and was pacing me as I drove down the hill into the San Fernando Valley.
Wow.
And helicopters have the capacity to turn sideways and still proceed in the direction they were going. This helicopter, which, by the way, the sound was incredibly muffled. It sounded, like it should have been rattling the fillings in my teeth, because it was less than 50 to 100 feet up and no more than maybe 150 feet in front of me, leading me down the hill. This object then turned sideways so that I could look into the cabin, and I didn't see a pilot. So I think that UFO intelligence was showing me not only can they stage visual displays that are illusory. I don't think there was helicopters there. I think it was a thought projection of some kind, a thought form. Sort of like a la the movie The Matrix, which a virtual reality is created, and the intelligence feeds into your consciousness images which you believe are physical but are illusory in nature. And they also show that they are reflective, that I had a conversation about illusion and they gave me an illusion. So this is also a form of human-initiated contact experience, because the UFO intelligence responded to our conversation.
And it individualized. It explains a lot of things, the theory, and it explains the individualization of many experiences, where many people will witness the same exact event, but oftentimes, although the major portions will be agreed upon, they'll each have different experiences that they felt and are very convinced happened individually. And they did, because of what you're saying. The event was customized virtually for them.
Our dogs are getting hungry, so Mrs.
Okay. I've got my puppies. Here's my little girl too. Here's my girl.
So this is an amazing journey that I went on. Time after time after time, they were feeding me these contact experiences. The most amazing one, which I should share, happened in November 1994. We were operating out of the Queen Valley and Joshua Tree National Monument. That was before it became a national park. And we were at 4,000 foot elevation at the base of the Queen Mountain. Spectacular, pristine nature. I should describe the contact experience that happened the previous month, October. At that night, I was with 6 other contact workers. And we noticed that every time we turned our head to look at every time I turned my head to look at a different section of sky, I would see a shooting star. And the shooting star was stereotypic. It was each time I turned my head to look north, then a few minutes later south, I saw a shooting star that was exactly the same as the previous one. It was the same length of trail, same brightness, same color, and same angle with the horizon. And this happened 5 times in a row. I turned to my coworker, this Russian contactee called Misha, and he said, "Do you want to know how many times it happened to me that I turned my head and a shooting star was exactly the same?" I said, "Sure, tell me." 20 times in a row. So this was showtime. They were telling us that an anomalous shooting star visual display could be linked to consciousness, and that by turning our head in a different direction, the unseen intelligence, presumably extraterrestrial behind the flying saucer phenomena, was giving us this visual display. The next month, it was just Misha and I were again in the same location, and we were looking at Negri Hill. It was a 600-foot rock pile at the southern end of the Little Queen Valley. It was a couple of 100 yards away. And Misha was looking at the Negri Hill, and he said, "There's another one." And I go, "Another what?" He said, "I just saw a shooting star." And I had been looking in the same section of sky above Negri Hill. I saw nothing.
Wow.
I then asked him to describe it, and he did. And then he said, "There's another one." And I said, "What are you seeing?" "I didn't see anything." And he described it. It was just like the previous one. I then looked down his arm like it was the barrel of a gun and said, "Is that where the location that you say you saw?" And he said, "Yeah, and there's another one." And I saw nothing.
Wow.
Now, my vision was pretty good in those days. It was before I needed glasses. I was another half decade or so. So I got very excited because after what happened the previous month, when they showed us that anomalous shooting star displays could be linked to consciousness, I said to Misha, I said, "Have them show me what you just saw." He said, "Show Dr. Burkes." And like that, a shooting star appeared above Negri Hill. And I said, "Is that just like the other three that you had seen?" He said, "Exactly."
You know, you hear this story time and time again. Someone will say, this happened to me, my MUFON case just from 2 months ago. I was talking with Stephanie. It was like, it'd be really neat to see a light being or an orb or a light ship. And boom, 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 3 flashes, it's flexing and moving and, 500 feet above a building. And I was able to get video that time and another time the same. And you hear the same exact story time and time again. It's connected to consciousness. And it's even unintentional, at times.
In your case, it was. In ours, it was very determined because my heart is now beating very fast. I'm saying to myself, this is showtime. They're going to show me a mechanism of contact and use an illusory visual display. So I said, "Could you show me one more time, please?" And Misha said, "Show Joe." And just like that, again, above Negri Hill, a shooting star visual display that looked exactly like the one that I had seen and the 4 others that Misha had described. Well, now, of course, I'm very excited. And I'm talking out to, well, the invisible intelligence that's staging this phenomena, feeling a little self-conscious. I said out there, it was just Misha and I in the middle of this Queen Valley. It was totally deserted. I said, "Whoever you are, we have this thing called coincidence." And people will say, Dr. Burkes is a very good ER doctor. He takes good care of his patients. But when it comes to astronomy, he doesn't know his ass from his elbow. And it was just a coincidence. And Misha was lying. So that's how a wannabe skeptic would explain it away. So I said to him, "Could you please one more time show me?" And this time, whereas the other two were like that, idiot, there was a pregnant pause. 5 seconds go by, 10 seconds go by. Finally, faint shooting star appears in the exact location, as if to say with this pregnant pause, "Don't you know what we're doing, Dr. Burkes? This is a staged event." And this was showtime. So out of these contact experiences, I developed the virtual experience model. And it's very helpful in that it shows how UFO intelligences can use illusions to establish communication. Now people say, "Well, why would they want to do shooting stars?" I say, "Well, I don't think they just do shooting stars. I think if they can stage an anomalous visual display of a shooting star, they can do it for any kind of shape you or they imagine. So saucers, red orbs, triangles, all of them may be illusory." And of course, the question comes up, why are they doing this? Why would anyone do this? And I on Facebook, someone asked me that question just the other day. I said, "Well, have you ever heard the expression shoot 'em down?" There have been segments of the U.S. and worldwide military, and this has been documented, and the UFO literature have attempted and have claimed successful shoot-downs of UFOs. So if you're flying over hostile territory and you have a choice between putting a live crew in jeopardy or have a visual display that looks like a saucer to communicate you're present, which are you going to do?
Of
I
course.
think you're going to choose the visuals display.
Yeah.
Also, you have to remember that although presumably UFOs are using some kind of free energy system, the energy requirements of moving from outer space into our atmosphere, or if they are interdimensional beings, moving from some other dimension into our plane of existence, that may be requiring tremendous energy. And in terms of energy conservation, if you can stage a visual display using some kind of probe and a holographic technology,
Oh, yeah.
and of course, there's the final reason why you would want to use visual displays, because this, not just of UFOs, but also of beings. And many of the people describe their contact at home or in vehicles where they've been stopped by UFO intelligences that take the form of beings or entities. If you are actually having a physical encounter with a being from another star system, there would be considerable risk of contagion. We may have in our bodies microbes that would harm them, and vice versa. So if you can stage a holographic type of encounter, no risk of contagion, no risk of spreading. So these are a bunch of reasons why the visual display, but they also do auditory displays too, which if we had time, I could get into as well.
Well, it's it explains so many different aspects of this phenomena, and it reminds me of when people feed baby condors. They have a little puppet, and the puppet is what the baby condor thinks is the mother, and it's basically the zookeeper's way of communicating with the zoo animal, is these puppets and these kind of avatars. And we may be in our own little kind of zoo, and they may be presenting things that make it easier for us to live in that zoo and not be freaked out like zookeepers do.
As an advocate for contact, I have to register a protest, Your Honor. Now compare us to caged animals who have their freedom taken away, and ETs comparing them to us, I think is not necessarily the best example to use. I think, in my judgment, these intelligences have been here for a very long time. Their mission is to assist us during this very trying time of rapid change. And I believe that as conscious intelligent beings, we share more with UFO intelligences and the entities, if they come from star systems or other dimensions. We share more with them than the zookeepers share with those poor imprisoned condors.
Sure, sure.
So I protest, Your Honor.
There's, it's difficult to get analogies in this situation. You have the parent-child analogy, you have the zookeeper analogy. There's a lot of different ones, but it seems obvious that this virtual experience would be designed for us in a lot of ways too, because they must have some form of compassion, to not make us scared, and it's interesting that they even choose to be seen, and in what form they choose to be seen, and what ways they choose to communicate, like with the light, flashing light. And I think so the virtual experience really describes all the other weird stuff that happens around it, from orbs to any.
It's a very powerful tool. It's something that is very frightening, however, to major segments of the UFO subculture. One prominent investigator who worked as a scientist at NASA Ames for many years, who was a fundamentalist, evangelical Christian, I should say evangelical Christian, he said to me, "I don't like your theory very much, Dr. Burkes, because if what you say is true, and you can say goodbye, all bets are off on human free will and human history, because an intelligence that is able to stage visual displays could also create belief systems." And so that was, I think for a lot of people who, MUFON has engaged in what they hope is a scientific investigation of UFOs. And they approach investigations as if UFOs were an engineering problem, and they describe the object, the speed, and the direction, and the color. Of course, it doesn't tell you anything about the beings inside or the civilization, but they call that an investigation. And if what I say is true, that most, but not all, definitely some UFOs are physical objects with radar traces and can create all kinds of physical traces. Some UFOs are absolutely physical. But
No doubt. No
they've been
doubt.
chasing, if what I say is true, then poor MUFON has been chasing shadows mostly for the last 50 years. So they would definitely reject this theory. And then you have contactees who think that every light in the sky is ET saying hello to them. And the idea that UFO intelligences would stage visual displays and aren't flying around signaling at them, this upsets their particular belief system. So when I've tried to put this theory forward, I've gotten grief from all sides of the ufological political spectrum.
Well, I think the UFO community is changing though in a lot of regards because I'm hearing the words screen memories more and more. So they're accepting little bits and pieces, you know, and I think maybe in time, you know, because virtual reality is more and more in our society. And I think over time, people are going to incorporate that kind of thinking more and more. So I think it's a very reasonable thought. We're already in our human sciences experimenting with sharing thoughts and communicating thoughts, and who knows how successful the military has been with this stuff. So to imagine advanced civilization doing this to a very high believable level, we're able to do it with video games now. So it's not illogical or in any way irrational to assume that a more advanced culture could do it. You also had that intelligence, this reverse kind of intelligence counterintelligence.
Right.
And I thought it was really important and just really interesting.
World geopolitical situation. All my volunteer activities has been to challenge power. When I was in the civil rights movement, it was to end the racist system in the South. When I worked as a physician who recruited, well, I was a medical student at the time, I recruited doctors to serve at National Farm Workers, United Farm Workers clinics in the San Joaquin Valley.
Bless you, bless you.
To empower working class to have a better life. And so when I looked at the world UFO truth embargo, it didn't take me very long after I became a contact worker in 1992 to understand that this phenomena threatens all terrestrial elites, and that the UFO cover-up, the so-called truth embargo, was not an aberration, but is a way in which the status quo defends itself. Because after all, if you're a military man and these flying saucers can fly circles around your Top Gun and you're supposed to secure the airspace, if we reveal the reality of UFOs, you will be shown to be impotent or incompetent or both and unable to secure the airspace. If you're a captain of industry who happens to make a lot of money selling fossil fuels, and these UFOs are not flying on fossil fuels, the idea that under conditions that would be safe, not used for weapons, their propulsion system and energy systems could be downloaded into technological culture, you might be out of $1 trillion worth of profits every year.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And if you're a politician, there's a downside to contact as well, because this nationalism is the name of the game, as Stanton Friedman has said. And if people became aware that there's a tremendous diversity of life out in space, instead of seeing ourselves as American, Russian, or Chinese, we started to see ourselves as one planet, one people. The national politicians who derive their power from promoting separation, conflict, they too would be diminished in their ability. One planet, one people, one universe, one people could put a lot of politicians out of work. And so you have every single power elite in society being threatened by this.
Yeah, all of them.
So for me, and someone who imagined I could do some good, not just as a medical doctor, but in terms of medical work made large, a kind of social medicine, the idea of being a contact activist and challenging the power of the elites to empower people to, on a grassroots level, make contact, fulfills what I imagine is a mission of a social medicine made large.
Absolutely. As the son of a social justice warrior and someone who has social justice pumping through my veins, that's a really inspirational thought. It really is.
So the counterintelligence model comes in is that if you look at the way in which the authorities respond to UFOs, it's as if UFOs are an enemy force. You have attempts at shoot downs to get their technology. I imagine if any ET was captured, they would be interrogated quite harshly. And then you have the intelligence services, since they can't shoot down all the UFOs, they go after the people who are in communication with them. So you have penetration of UFO groups by the intelligence services. You have someone like Sergeant Doty, I should say, who's a former intelligence operative for AFOSI, who in an interview in an interview in 2016 said that when he came through the Air Force Office of Special Investigation training for people who are going to deal with the UFOs, there were over 125 other agents doing the same thing, monitoring the UFO community and monitoring UFOs. So they approach it as a counterintelligence operation.
Yep.
And so the question is, where do we stand, the people? I would say we stand on the opposite side of that operation. And this is our birthright. I know Dr. Greer likes to call it a citizen diplomacy, but the reality is that every person who's conscious and awake on this planet can make contact.
Right on.
And you don't need a whole lot of specialized training. Basically, what you need is to know how to feel inside. And it was Dr. Greer that said that an Aborigine in Australia signaling at the ETs, or the intelligence behind the phenomena, with smoke signals can do more to achieve communication than the entire national security apparatus with all their technology. Because that one person is sending a message of welcome and love and wanting communication, and the others are sending a message of domination, control, and war.
Absolutely. It's
So that's where the intelligence counterintelligence issue comes in. Counterintelligence is the authorities' response, and we are dealing directly with that intelligence to promote what I hope are going to be successful campaigns for world peace based on social justice, one planet, one people.
You say it so eloquently, and it's easy to espouse about peace because we all care about peace. It's easy to say, we're all one, and it's easy to go around the halls of Congress lobbying for war and weapons and saying something's a threat. It's not easy in a public or political context to lobby for peace. There's no profit in peace, and the sociopathic society that we have now really doesn't care about 2 generations from now. They're willing to mortgage their ecology for their temporary profits, and as you said, there's big.
It may not be profitable, but it's patriotic. And preserving the nation and preventing war is one of the highest forms of patriotism from my point of view.
Absolutely. And the greatest national security would come from all of those different factors. We're coming from preserving the environment, saving our future. That's big national security. Peaceable communications with these more advanced civilizations as opposed to hostile. Of course, we would learn more from communication than confrontation. We could learn bits and pieces.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of people in the Pentagon who take their points from that mythical Southern colonel who supposedly said back in the 50s, why don't we shoot down some of those flying discs and see if they're hostile or not?
I love that.
This is a problem. And as the ATIP program moves forward, they're going to put out the message that this is a potential national security risk. Well, let me tell you, if the UFO intelligences have been here for not hundreds but thousands of years, and they wanted to invade our planet, wouldn't we be a more, shall we say, tempting target? If we say 20,000 years ago when we had spears, or 10,000 years ago when we had bows and arrows, or 500 years ago when we had flintlocks, or even World War I, what are they waiting for? If they're trying to take us over and do harm, they can't seem to organize the invasion very well, can they?
No. And it almost seems, to me, it seems almost racist in a weird way, because we're judging them by their appearance and their ability and not by their actions. I want to be judged by others by my actions, not by my words even, not by my appearance, certainly. But my words can be colorful and nice, but judge me by my actions, and I want to judge others by their actions. And you don't just, in my opinion, if you look at the vast majority of the evidence, And by the way, you did wonderful work here in this study, Beyond UFOs. You did wonderful, wonderful work, and everyone should get this book. This book shows that the vast majority of the abductions, which people oftentimes often cite to say that ET is negative, the vast majority of people, had positive experiences, even had healings, psychic ability improved. When they go to nuclear power plants, they're not going to nuclear power plants to set them off. They're going to warn us. That's not even a neutral maneuver. That's a very benevolent maneuver. It's a proactive maneuver. Time and time again, when we lock missiles on them, they turn away. That's a very peaceful maneuver. So we should judge them by their actions. Then will people say, what about cattle mutilations? Well, you can't definitively say that's ET. It's not fair to definitively say that that's ET. So to judge someone,
if in all fairness, we should say that although it is a small percentage, perhaps 15% of the contact experiencers as documented in the free study have had a negative experience, you know, they certainly should get the best psychological counseling they can. And if you read the books of people, well, like John Mack, who was a Harvard professor,
yeah.
he wrote 2 books on the so-called abduction phenomena. And with proper counseling, an experiencer can integrate what has happened to them in a positive way, so they can overcome a lot of the fear and terror, which is a big response that people have. And one of the interesting things about the free study is that if you look at the people who have had negative experiences, there's an increased number of people who have had only 1 or 2 contacts, whereas people who have had repeated contacts over many years had a higher percentage of positive experiences. This suggests that as people get over their initial fear or terror of what's happening to them, they can have a more positive view of contact and the beings they're interacting with.
That's a great point. I'd like to end with a situation that happened and get your feedback. You know me a little bit, and you know a person in our group that we just call Super Sleuth online. And Super Sleuth and I do a lot of psi stuff, back and forth, psi training, and a lot of different weird stuff. And you have a lot of really cool insights into this. And I was telling you about this story before we went on the air, and we were getting into it, and I thought, you know what, this would be so cool to get on the air. Do you mind if we get into this for a moment?
Go ahead.
Awesome. So we did a PK experiment, and the premise behind it was mercurial hermetics. And that notion is Mercury was the god of messages, and also a little bit of a trickster, very wise, but a positive trickster, not like a mean trickster. And Hermes, the same kind of a thing. And so the notion was to tap into this kind of universal Murphy's Law thing that happens. I have a comedy background, so I know that the trickster can be, a comedian can be a friendly, good, positive comedian or trickster, or there's some very dark, negative comedians, which were very popular during my time. Or they could be, you know, dependent on their audience, like Skinwalker Ranch. When there were friendlier people there, they had more benign experiences. But when there were more hostile and more, you know, intense, negative and military people there, they had the more negative experiences. So to make a long story short, wanted to utilize this function of the universe in a PK experiment. And a PK experiment was, she lives in California, I live in New York. I put a marble down and it had demarcations on it in case the marble moved at all. And she was going to utilize PK in whatever way she wanted to. And I wanted to try this mercurial experiment. And it's so funny how you guessed the ending to this when I was talking about this before the recording. So she put the marble on an iPad with, you know, demarcations or whatever, so we would know if it moved at all the tiniest bit. And I said, you know, it's going to happen at some point within 48 hours. She said, it's not going to happen at a specific time. I'm like, no, at some point, 48 hours. Anyway, the second night, basically, the second day, she looked for the marble and it was gone. And so was the iPad. And you guessed that before. What do you think is going on? That she still hasn't found either, by the way.
I think the UFO intelligences have access to hyperdimensional space. They can move in and out of our time space and exist as an unseen intelligence. If we had time, I would share with you, I was present, I believe, during the placement of an alien implant during field work when a coworker of mine, Misha, again, this Russian contactee, grabbed his leg during field work and cried out in pain. We looked later on, and it was black and blue, and he complained of pain. So I did an X-ray, and it showed a foreign body, which was seen by the radiologist.
Wow.
He was ET friends, they came by in a visitation and removed it. I repeated the x-ray and it was gone. Now,
Wow.
the story is that we were operating again in very cold weather. It was 40 degrees, 4,000 foot elevation, and we had 5 layers of clothing on us, and we even taped our boots to our thermals so that there'd be a seal at our legs so no cold air would get into our clothing. And there was not a hole in his clothing, and there was not a hole in his skin. The object materialized right within the subcutaneous tissue, apparently.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
so this is what they do, and I think they staged that encounter to show Dr. Burkes with the understanding that I would write it up and share it with the world as I've just done now.
And as I just have done now too, probably the same exact thing. The trickster wanted a little publicity and knew how to get it. Interesting, fascinating. Well, Dr. Burkes, I just appreciate your time and your thinking. And where can people get more information about you and your work?
I don't have a platform other than Facebook. I'm working on publishing a book, The Notes from the Contact Underground. That's the worldwide network of contact experiencers that I've been honored to serve. And there's another chapter coming out in Beyond UFOs, Volume 2, where I describe the virtual experience hypothesis. And I recommend that everyone go ahead and get Volume 1. Preston Dennett and I have written a chapter on medical healings. I think you'll find it fascinating, and it's well worth the purchasing price. That'll support a very good cause. And I want to thank Alien Protocols for letting me speak, and hopefully we can edit together the 2 sections in a seamless way.
I think we can in some way, or however it works out. I think it's going to work out great because the content and the insights you have are very, very valuable. And I'm really looking forward to the book because you're not only just your knowledge, but also your experiences. You've had so many need to be preserved, and people can learn a lot from them. Thank you so much, Dr. Burkes, for your time.
You're welcome.